Thanks for inviting me into your home, your long-haul truck, RV, camper, taxi, your parents' well-appointed basement with the simulated wood paneling, electric fireplace, and the painting of dogs playing poker, your loft, that greasy spoon just off the interstate, and your cabin in the woods. Welcome to Coast AM, the very best in late-night talk radio. I'm Richard Serrett, and tonight, this morning, I'm coming to you live from the home studio in Old Thornhill, just north of Toronto. And it's great to be with you on a Sunday. I can't recall if I've ever guest hosted Coast on a Sunday, so I'm looking forward to this. It's like walking around in a big, mysterious castle and discovering a secret passageway or a secret room behind a bookcase. I mean, does Sunday night, Monday morning on Coast have a different vibe, a different energy? Let's find out, shall we? And I think we've managed to put together kind of a classic Coast lineup for you. Coming up in the first half, Roderick Martin is a UFO investigator for the Mutual UFO Network. He's a Texas certified field investigator and host of the YouTube channel and podcast, What's the Big Secret?, where he discusses all aspects of the UAP, UFO, ET phenomenon, disclosure, the Black Knight satellite, alien abductions, you name it. Roderick had his first UFO encounter at the age of 12, and he'll describe his perspective as an experiencer, having grown up in a Black Christian family. And indeed, he'll touch on cultural and racial differences within the UFO alien abduction arena. One of the aspects of the Betty and Barney Hill case, the first famous alien abduction case, was the fact that Betty and Barney Hill were a mixed racial couple living in America and coming forward with their remarkable story in the early 1960s. Coming up in hours 3 and 4, Secrets of Ancient America. Now, I think Coast listeners are on board with the idea that much of what we learned in school about pre-Columbus America is probably false, that indeed Columbus wasn't first, he was probably last. And there are so many mysteries and legends surrounding the ancient earthworks and serpent mounds of the Ohio Valley, the idea that there could be a secret 5,000-year-old underground city hidden somewhere beneath Death Valley, the idea that an ancient lost civilization perhaps once lived in a secret underground city below the Grand Canyon. And what about the ancient and mysterious rock wall discovered beneath parts of Dallas County in what is now called Rockwall, Texas? The rock wall of Rockwall is of particular interest to Josh Reeves. Josh is a Texas-based researcher, filmmaker, and radio talk show host who's been researching unexplained mysteries since he was in grade 3. And Josh has just released Volume 3 of his Lost Secrets of Ancient America collection. Volume 1 of Lost Secrets of Ancient America was the first documentary, I believe, about the rock wall mystery. Volume 3, as I say, is now out, 8 years in the making, and we'll touch on some of the amazing mysteries he examines in the film, including the Hoover Dam. Perhaps you've heard the legend that the Hoover Dam is actually a Stargate. You heard me correctly. Can't wait to get into that discussion with Josh Reeves. Again, he's coming up in the second half of the show. And I've also carved out lots of time for you tonight, this morning, for your questions and comments with both Josh and Roderick. So here we go. Welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. Come on in, weary traveler, hang your cloak on a peg, grab a stool, and come warm yourself by the fire. There are stories to be told, and you are among friends. I'm Richard Serrett, and this is Coast to Coast AM. Why don't you stay a while? Roderick Martin is a UFO investigator for MUFON and the host of the popular podcast and YouTube channel called Why the Big Secret. When it comes to UFOs, he's uncovered cultural differences in many minority experiences, researched UFO encounters, and interviewed alien abductees from the minority perspective, and has become arguably the most trusted source on these topics within the Black community. Roderick Martin, welcome to Coast. How are you?
I am doing fine. How about you, Richard?
I'm terrific, thank you, and so delighted to have you on board tonight. First of all, let me ask you, because this is something I'm genuinely curious about. Becoming a certified field investigator for MUFON, how does one become certified?
Well, basically, it's going to all start with, of course, someone becoming interested in UFOs, Richard. So when they go to MUFON, they have the opportunity to either have a membership there where they can get access to information. But once they have that membership, they will then have the opportunity to sign up to become a UFO investigator with MUFON. And once they've done that, then MUFON will then send all of us through, or the new people through MUFON University. And upon completion of that university, you then become certified by MUFON standard to be a UFO investigator.
Oh, can you just give me just kind of a very general overview of what goes on at MUFON University?
Well, basically, you're number one, you're going to go through the typical basic training that they offer when it comes down to investigators. Now, once it goes from there, you will go through all of the different classes that they provide, whether it's investigations, how to write reports, all of the different things that they offer, so that you are very efficient at being a UFO investigator. And so once it's done, you will take a series of exams. And if you pass those exams, then they will then crown you certified.
Crowned certified. Fantastic. Give us a little bit of a tour of the YouTube channel and podcast, Why the Big Secret? What do you talk about? What can we expect?
Well, we start with the initial question, or I would say the journey. We like to tend to talk about what is happening out there in ufology, or whatever's going on with government cover-ups, and when it comes down to UFOs and UAPs, as well as people's experiences. But what I'm starting to truly get to the bottom of, Richard, is that it's not about the how and what is happening. I think the most important question is why. Why is really a big thing. And once we begin to get people to ask the questions why, to think why, because I always tell my audience that your eyes are useless when your mind is blind. It's time to think why. Then we're able to get curiosity. And then it's my job to give people enough information that they can read, see, hear, talk about, just to awaken their curiosity to the possibility that we're not alone in the universe, as well as whatever is happening when it comes down to UFOs, aliens. And so with Why the Big Secret, we cover a multitude of topics. But, one of the things we generally try to do, and that I'm aiming for, is to really pin down into the African-American community, because there is just a lack in that area when it comes down to the exposure and stories that are being unveiled. And that's the whole, journey for Why the Big Secret.
Well, let's talk about your experience as an African-American, having seen a UFO. I believe you were 12. And just talk to me about, coming from a Christian household, being an African-American, how that was maybe different than what, let's say, for example, I might have experienced had I ever seen a UFO, and I have not, for the record. But just kind of walk us through, first of all, your encounter, and then the cultural differences.
Well, I think at first, let me just kind of get to, my background is Christian, and so that's how I was raised. And within that, my mother did an awesome job of making sure that we studied, read the Bible. So to begin with the story, one evening, we were out playing, and usually around when it gets dark, my mother flicks the street lights, and that's the indicator for us to come in. And of course, you had to be close enough to home to even see that. So that kept us in rain there. So one evening, right when it was getting dark, I started my journey home, and I was the first one to get called in. So you get the ridicule from the others. You got to go in early, ha, ha, ha. But I think overall I got the best of it all. So by the time I walked to the home and looked up that's where I saw it. It was kind of like a white disc. It wasn't making any sound. It was just kind of zipping in a zigzag right across going toward downtown Dallas, because I live right there near the Dallas Zoo. And right behind it was two jets that was following it. And I thought that was strange. And at that time, I didn't realize how significant that moment would be as it is today. But it stayed my secret, Richard. I was in a neighborhood where this is not something, because we had street corners, and you're not going to go up and say, hey, I saw a UFO last night. Even a neighborhood bully is not going to do that and lose his street credit. So it stayed my secret for years to come. And as I became an athlete and was well known in that particular time, but it just stayed my secret, but it always was seared into my brain.
What about within your house? Did you share it with your parents?
No one. I didn't really understand it. I knew it was something unusual. I've watched enough TV at that time at a young age to get curious with, I think at that time was, I don't know if Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but there was some few, Star Trek or something was out at that point that I watched. But I knew it was not a normal object that was in the sky. Man, I told no one. I didn't tell my mother, and no one knew of this until I got a little older.
Can you give me a time frame? What are we talking? 80s? 1980s?
For the audience, I'm 25 times 2 plus 2. So, yes, we'll probably go back into the early 80s, probably 82, 83, something like that, because I was like 13 years old, 12 or 13, and so that's the time frame when the event happened.
And as a 13-year-old, you decided, you didn't want to announce this publicly on the street corner because you would lose the, your street cred, or you'd be teased within the house with your parents because it didn't square with the biblical narrative, I suppose. Was that the reason for your silence there?
Absolutely. I will say that at first I thought about, I would tell my mom, I was like, well, maybe I'll go in and just be excited. And I was already excited, but go and tell her. And then I gave it some thought. It played with what I was already, my teaching, so to speak. And I was like, nah, it can't be a UFO. There's no one else out there. This is not, something from some other world. I mean, this is it. The story that I was told is the story that I was told. I didn't think about there was some extraterrestrial life or something else. And so even when that happened, it still just played with my psychic as a young boy. And that's where the conflict started. I wasn't traumatized by it. I just didn't talk about it because at this point, my mom was truly into church, and she probably would have just slapped the book on top of my head or something, And I just thought about all the other things that could happen if I had mentioned it to her.
And how about now? How do you square the UFO, UAP, ET, alien abduction phenomenon with the biblical narrative, or do you try?
Well, you mean as far as me personally, or if I was talking to a family member?
No,
well, I've evolved now personally as an adult, and I'm more into this curious phase. And so therefore the options of thoughts as I read different scriptures in the Bible that I've read, one in particular. So my idea of what I was taught when I was young has completely changed. And so therefore I have not said, okay, I'm no longer going to be Christian because now I know that there's other stories or there's life that exists outside this planet and outside the book that I was taught into. So that's just me. And oftentimes it is a problem, or could be one, talking to people who are still deep into the Bible itself or Christianity, and they just don't want to hear it. And I was there years ago, but now this is what I do, and so therefore I don't take the mission to go and try to prove to people, hey, this is this, because when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. But for me now, you can say that I'm very curious. You can say that Now all the possibilities are there for me, and so therefore I look at things in a whole totally different way, even the Bible itself.
And how about as a black man and talking with friends, colleagues, family members about UFOs? Is that still difficult? I mean, does one still risk, I don't know, losing street cred, as you put it earlier?
Well, the street cred was when you were young, when you
Right.
had your small groups and stuff. Now, as an adult, it's reputation. It's all of the things that you built, your character, or whatever they think about you at this point. And you have to get to a point where you can care less what somebody says and think. You think for yourself. But as an adult, you begin to have a little more stronger emotions. You got a little more credit when you're talking, because you're going to show what we call documentation, and documentation beats conversation, no matter where you are. So if I need to talk about UFOs, look, here are some sightings, here's some information, here are some things. And so over the years, as I got older and my interest grew, and then you got TV shows, you got all these things, you got books, and so there was a lot more things that I was exposed to really protect, what I would have probably have went through with no evidence,
Earlier on, I was talking about the one of the important aspects of the Betty and Barney Hill alien abduction case, which I won't say it's overlooked, but I don't think it can be repeated enough, really, is because I think it speaks to the credibility, the genuineness of Betty and Barney Hill, was that they were a mixed racial couple making the decision to go public with their story in America in the early 1960s. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, this is something that you make a great observation. I still today look at the Betty and Barney Hill story, and I do understand and enjoy reading about it and all the things that they've gone through. But when it gets down to a cultural lens, especially in today's, and we bring it up current of people talking about their experiences, then it still puts itself in I would say a place of its own, because it was an interracial couple. So you got half and half of, I use this scenario or analogy of where there was not that much ridicule had it been an African American by himself. So when I look at the Betty and Barney Hill story, and of course you hear what happened, you got the evidence, and so everybody's heard of that story. But it also led me where I am today, where I decided to really get and take a deep dive into the cultural lens of this UFO phenomenon when it comes down to African Americans. And you only mentioned Betty and Barney Hill, but what other stories can we pinpoint, in a multitude, if I count them on my fingers, or, how many, and what stories do other people know in our community? And so that's really where my research started to begin, and then noticing, hey, wait a minute, these stories are still unfounded. We can't find them. They're there, but why are people not talking about it? And so that's where the Betty and Barney Hill story, began my quest. But then I also knew it's still a different scenario for today.
Roderick Martin, UFO investigator for MUFON in Texas, and host of the popular podcast and YouTube channel, Why the Big Secret. I wanted to ask you about disclosure and where we're at in terms of disclosure. Now, I've kind of lost the thread on the Office of the Director of National Intelligence UAP report that was supposed to come out around end of October, I believe, and then it was delayed, and then it was delayed again. I don't know. Can you bring me up to speed? Do you know where are we? Where are we with that? Has that come? Has there been any announcement as to when we might see it?
No, and I think what's happening is, we all have this anticipation, and but they have a different agenda. And as they maneuver between the Whistleblowers Act and all the things that are coming out, they can just postpone it. But at the end of the day, they just got to prepare the way they want to put this narrative out. And I think that, we all are sitting here waiting for things to happen. But at the end of the day, we're at their mercy. And we've always been at the mercy of what narratives are out there. But I think now people are getting a little more antsy. And like you said, we want the truth. And that is what is happening right now, that groundswell.
All right, Roderick, we're going to take a timeout. We're going to swing into the bottom of the hour, back and discuss UAPs, UFOs, the alien abduction phenomenon with Roderick Martin, right here on Coast to Coast AM. Say hello on Twitter at Richard Serrett, S-Y, because I love you, R-E-T-T. Strange antennas have appeared in the foothills around Salt Lake City, and authorities have no idea what they are or who put them up. As first reported by KSL TV5 in Utah, people first began noticing the antennas a few years ago, or about a year ago. They're simple machines made up of a low-ray fiberglass antenna, a locked battery pack, and a solar panel to power it. The Salt Lake City Public Lands Department has been pulling them down as they find them and told KSL TV that there have been as many as a dozen. Now, it's illegal to place structures on public lands without permission, and some of the antennas have appeared on steep peaks. In one instance, the removal of an antenna required a team of 5 people. Other antennas were found on land managed by the University of Utah and the Forest Service. For more on this mystery, check out the story on the mysterious antennas in the news section up at coasttocoastam.com. Back to more of my conversation with MUFON field investigator, podcast host, Roderick Martin, right here on Coast to Coast AM. Back with Roderick Martin, UFO investigator and host of the YouTube channel and podcast Why the Big Secret, whythebigsecret.com. We were talking about the that missing ODNI UAP report. That's the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and it's mandated by Congress as part of the National Defense Authorization Act. It was mandated the report be delivered to Congress by the end of October of 2022, and it wasn't. And this is supposed to be an annual unclassified update on all of the UAPs, that have been, I guess, investigated or reported the previous year. So, I mean, I guess it's a great indication of how serious, I guess, that the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is taking all of this, Roderick. And then we go back to last May when we had the Congress holding. It was really historic. I think it was the first UFO hearing in 50 years. We had the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, Scott Bray, basically shrugging his shoulders and I don't know, and I don't have that information, and I've never heard about UFO incursions over nuclear facilities. Quite clearly, they're not taking this serious. So let me just ask you straight out, because it's the name of your YouTube channel, your podcast. Why the big secret? What are they? Why are they so afraid of disclosure?
Well, that's a great question. And I think it's something that we should really, really ask that question, why? Now, from my perspective, as always, it could lead down the roads of technology, things that they definitely want to hide. But when it comes down to the public sentiment, they always had the game of, hiding the information from us. And like I've told people all the time, it just gets to a point now where we think that we're going to get disclosure. We think that we're going to get everything that they know. So if you can imagine, Richard, they can have 10 doors, and they're not going to tell us what's behind every door. So now we say, oh, we know what's behind door number 1. Okay, they'll reveal that, but we'll never know about the other 9 doors. So I think why is a great way for everyone to begin, because most people are still just listening to what and how that they're doing things. They're not showing it yet. They have not come out with the report, and that's what they're focusing on. And as we know, the how and the what is never as important as the why. And so from my standpoint, for one end of the spectrum, they probably really don't care. But I think now that the Whistleblowers Act is being activated, and they knew it was coming, and that's the potential of things now is going to surface that they can now kind of plausibly deny, because on one hand, they're going to say, oh, like you said, we don't know anything. Okay, now they let out some of these reports, and then people begin to talk that want to be protected. It's just going to go against it. I think the preparation of it all is them trying to position themselves.
Do you think that there is a battle going on backstage at the Pentagon, at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence? You have some pro disclosure people, and they want maybe a controlled disclosure, and then you have those that are adamantly against it. And so occasionally we see maybe evidence of this battle spilling out onto the main stage for public view occasionally, but they try and distract us and say, look over here.
Absolutely, you're correct. And it started with that congressional hearing. There was a phase in that hearing toward the end, and I forget the two names, but one in particular was Robert, Moultrie. And he was being questioned by a congressman. God, I forget his name. It'll come to me. But they was talking about the consequences, to what consequences would happen to people that they feel that it's putting out, not real information, information that they deem is untrue. And one of the congressmen came back and said, well, we don't have anything in place. And then, of course, DOD says, well, there's something we can talk about. Now, officially, they put that on a record right before our eyes, where they're now saying, okay, we're going to go after people. And he even said it, citizens. So you think about people like myself. You think about people that, we are reporting information, and all they have to do is just say, okay, that's against national security, or that's not true. So immediately when that happened, the other faction, Gillibrand, which I call my heroes, they come out with the Whistleblowers Act. So they knew behind the scenes, you see the two factions. So one is trying to put a tight lip on disclosure, and the other is saying, okay, we're going to now protect these people because they're getting ready to go after people. And I think that's what we're seeing right now, and I think people need to expect to really, truly prepare themselves for what is about to happen. And you're talking about money, you're talking about power, all of these things that they want to control with this disclosure.
Well, perhaps no coincidence we had that Area 51 website, dreamlandresort.com. George Arnoux, I believe, is his name. He was on Coast to Coast with George Knapp, maybe a month ago or so. And, of course, there was that no-knock warrant. The feds show up at his home and not really forthcoming on what they were looking for. But do you see that as maybe a shot being fired over the bow of so-called whistleblowers?
I did a whole video, Richard, about that on my YouTube channel when that happened, and I felt that moment was the first test run to what they was preparing to do. And definitely it worked out. They was able to go to this person's house, take everything that they wanted, even simple cameras, without even giving him a reason. They pretended to say, okay, maybe he had some things on his website. He took all the images down. Now, of course, I agree. They're not going to say pictures A, B, and C is what we got a problem with. Now we know what they got a problem with, right? But yes, I think it was a complete test run. I was telling everybody when that happened that night, when they first spoke about it, and I was telling people, out of everything that was said in that congressional hearing, what was not said, that was the most profound moment that people should have been paying close attention to, And just like you said, we'll handle that behind closed doors. And yes, Richard, that Dreamland, I think it's something in Dreamland when they did that. So absolutely, you're correct. That is my consensus, and that was a test run.
Do you anticipate
in my opinion?
Right. Do you anticipate, Roderick, then a chill? So, for example, in December 2017, we had that landmark New York Times article about the ATIP, the secret UFO study group in the Pentagon, and there was a series of follow-up articles, and then the release of the Tic Tac UFO video and so forth. Do you think that what happened at that May congressional hearing on UFOs, that is going to perhaps put a chill on these types of investigations by journalists? In other words, we may not see a New York Times story like that again for some time?
Well, I think that it may, I don't think it's going to hinder anything in particular. In fact, I think it's going to give us more precise information when someone does come forward, because as we know about the ATIP and all the backstories that we heard about it, and again, once they talked about or showed some of these Navy footage, and, we still had to get the Navy to say, okay, yeah, this Tic Tac is authentic, this video that you're watching. I think with the Whistleblowers Act, which is by the way, the best thing that could ever have happened to ufology. And we should be able to get, now, who is it going to cover like completely? Is it a blanket coverage of people, even like myself, who may get some information and share it we definitely do our checks and due diligence of the information. But at the end of the day, are we protected by this? Is it a blanket coverage? And that's what we need to truly find out, because it is the small guys, just like we saw, who was attacked. They didn't attack some of the bigger people, and I use the words attack. That could be pretty strong, but they did not go do a no-knock warrant on some of the bigger names out there. They did pick a site. They did pick, I think, a great test run. But back to your question about, would it now enhance some of the things versus the New York Times, or will we get more articles published? I think we will. But if they then, and don't get me wrong, both sides of the fence, though, Richard, the people that's behind the Whistleblowers Act and the people that are trying to keep disclosure, they both have taken an oath of national security. So they will come together. And if it's something that they do not want to disclose, both sides will slap national security on it. So we still, as a public, may got our answers or think that we're getting some people saying, okay, we're going to give you guys what you want. But I think at the end of the day, we're still going to get limited information.
Right. So, Roderick, you're not holding your breath for official disclosure anytime soon, perhaps within our lifetime.
No. And the other part of this is my humorous side. Do we really want what we're asking for? And I use an example, Richard, is I was on a plane the other day, and the pilot said, we're going to get some turbulence. And it shook crazy. I'm like, okay. But had I got off that plane, and because I truly, truly want disclosure, and they go, here's a pamphlet. We just want you to know, because of disclosure, that the turbulence was caused by a UAP that passed over us and messed up some of our instruments. Do we want that? Or we truly want to know what we know, or want to know, so to speak? And so I think that, the excitement of it and the excitement of disclosure, but if they really want to land some psychological warfare, this thing, start telling people, oh, by the way, we had a report down the street, one of your neighbors who was abducted, but we just want you to know we pass out the pamphlet in the neighborhood. That's my but, you know what I'm saying? So who knows?
Pandemonium.
Yes.
So how, if we're not going to have disclosure in our lifetime, official disclosure, what would satisfy you coming from the government?
I'm already past the point of what would satisfy. I call them the big secret keepers. And I think those big secret keepers, and that's whoever classifies that, from the government to private contractors and whoever else is protecting the story, I think nothing would satisfy anyone until there's a craft that will land and someone gets out of it and wave and say, my name is Akbach from Planet Xeon. It's just going to have to be that obvious, where the public would accept that there is life form somewhere else. Because they did a good job over the last 60 years. They had us telling the public, everyone, including myself, don't trust the big secret keepers. Don't trust them. Don't trust them. And now all of a sudden, we got to now go back and tell the public, trust them. They're about to disclose to us, and people's not, that transition is not happening fast enough. So in our lifetime, we're going to get tits and bits of information, but this is where people like yourself, myself, who go out and put these dots together and try to provide the storyline or the narrative that there is something happening, this is what could be happening, and the question still remains, why?
Do you subscribe to this theory that the secret keepers have alien technology at their disposal? Perhaps they have, as Ben Rich, the former director of Skunk Works, once said, they have the technology to take ET home. And so that they, I guess it was Richard Dolan who kind of posited this theory maybe first, they constitute a breakaway civilization. So they really don't care what happens to the rest of us plebes here on the planet. They're already off-world.
Well, let's rephrase that. Are you saying, now I do have an answer for your question. When you say they're off-world, what do you mean?
Well, this breakaway civilization that are in possession of alien technology. I'm going to head into a break here at the top of the hour. So why don't we meet on the other side, and we'll pick up on this point. Roderick Martin, my guest, MUFON field investigator in Texas, and the host of the popular YouTube channel and podcast, Why the Big Secret. Back with more of our conversation right here on Coast to Coast. Hey, welcome back. We will get back to my conversation with Roderick Martin in just a few moments. But I also wanted to draw your attention to an interesting story on the Coast website. His 2,867 flight hours, much of it in combat and Distinguished Flying Cross and 4 air medals, weren't enough to avoid a fatal crash near a Franklin, Kentucky farm exactly 75 years later now. Captain Thomas Mantell's flight that afternoon still remains shrouded in mystery. Mantell died while pursuing a UFO that was seen in the skies over Godman Army Airfield by countless people throughout the region surrounding Fort Knox. You can read more of this story about the questions that remain 75 years after this mysterious Fort Knox UFO incident and a downed pilot. That's in the news section at coasttocoastam.com. All right, your questions and comments for Roderick Martin, host of Why the Big Secret, right here on Coast to Coast AM. And we're back with Roderick Martin, host of Why the Big Secret, the YouTube channel and the podcast. He's a certified MUFON field investigator in Texas. Roderick, before the break, I asked you the big Lollapalooza question about whether part of the reason for the secrecy has to do with what Richard Dolan has called a breakaway civilization, that the keepers of the big secret, as you call them, have at their disposal alien technology, advanced technology. And this was hinted at by the late Ben Rich of Skunk Works, who said, we have the technology to send ET home. We have things out there in the desert and hangars that are 50 years beyond your wildest imaginations. Is that perhaps the reason that they're dragging their heels, that they don't care about much of anything, really? They have the tech. They have all the toys. We don't. They're not about to give them up.
I'm sure we learned a thing or two about the technology used by extraterrestrials, but whether or not the big secret keepers are abandoning Earth or not, I think it would all depends on what they believe and what they believe the intentions of these ETs. Now, I would say if they truly believe the ETs are a threat and there was no way out of here, sure, I can see them leaving. On the other hand, if they know the ETs are not a threat, then maybe the plan is to stay here and continue enjoying the money and power that they get from this technology. But either way, if they leave, I hope they leave the keys under the doormats so that we can move into the big houses.
I like that. Let's dive into the calls. Let's see. Let's begin with Justin in Boulder, Colorado on the wild card line. Justin, good evening. Welcome to Coast. You're on the line with Roderick Martin.
Good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Doing
Great.
Doing all right.
So I worked as a PMC for a little period of time early on in my career. And I was just curious about, a lot of these things that were put forward by Congress, said that they would be brought to light, et cetera, such things as the Tic Tac. Now, I just wanted to put some thought process into this. I mean, not that you guys you've been incredibly interesting the whole evening, but can you imagine if you were the first one to see the B-2 stealth bomber fly over? And I just always think about that kind of concept and how far ahead, particularly our military is, testing, and also now we have a near peer or if peer adversary in China that is developing products that is very, very much dangerous to our security as a nation. And I was very, very much curious to ask the question, do you believe that many of these sightings that have been occurred, that people have seen, could possibly have been just military aircraft or military equipment that was being tested out in the world at that time?
Great question, Justin. I mean, I've said for many years, I think the vast majority of sightings are advanced military weaponry and so forth, made in the good old USA. Roderick, what say you?
I agree with you. I agree with you both that we, are experiencing sightings of advanced military technology. I also believe that it's not China or somebody that is, having these drones that can fly from coast to coast within seconds. Because, I do believe in our military might, that we are probably have one of the most fierce military on this planet. And if there's any other country out there that could have something that can go coast to coast in seconds and put a weapon on it, it would change our way of life instantly. And so both sides are probably displaying their technology, but I will never rule out that some of these anomalies, UAPs that we see in the skies, are of extraterrestrial origin, because they are. And so it's easy for the big secret keepers to kind of keep us, keep the public, wondering, and by literally probably on purpose, displaying some of these unusual looking crafts to get the conversation started, to take us off what is really happening.
All right, Justin, great call. Thank you for that. Let's see. Let's go to Kathleen, east of the Rockies, Scranton, Pennsylvania. Kathleen, good evening, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Hi, Richard. And hi, Rod. What I'd like to ask you, Rod, with all these people that have been missing, like with Politis writing that 411 book and coming on, perhaps they're taking them. And perhaps they are living here amongst us on this earth with their own underground way. They live underground and then they come up either out of the ocean or out of caves or out of mountains. And therefore, they go on. They're only detected when they come out in their flights. And perhaps what happens is they take people and they use people to, experiment on them medically, and also to produce, to genetically engineer. And perhaps that's a reason, too. And if our government knows about it, they're not going to tell us, ever. Because why would they? If they're already censoring us through Google and all this other stuff, and they're sitting in the offices of Google and all these other things, why wouldn't they be hiding that dark secret too? And in the Bible, it does say in Obadiah, the book of Obadiah, on the 4th verse, God does reveal that you made your nests in the stars, and he treats them like they're below the heathen. And then he goes on to the 9th verse, and he calls them old tenement. So he's speaking to one of them in Obadiah, the book of Obadiah.
All right, Kathleen, a lot of great points raised there. Roderick, where do you want to start? Missing people being taken by ETs. Your thoughts?
Well, David Pilates have done a lot of work on that for us, what's happening in our national forests. And, of course, we've always had these stories of abductions over the years. It's not undocumented that these things are happening. Whether or not they live beneath the earth, within the earth, we do know the water has a high level of UFO activities, UAP activities. And number one, because, the earth is 73% water, and mankind has only explored maybe 3 or 4% of our oceans. And we don't have the technology, and they know that, or been there or done that. And so therefore, it's a perfect place for them to have a civilization to go unnoticed and to monitor our civilization from. But once again, biblically, there's a lot of things that talks about extraterrestrials in the Bible, and depending on a person's religion and how they view through their culture and lens is how they're going to perceive those stories. But, as we go back to what she was saying, I in my personal belief, I think they're here. They've been here. Now, as far as abducting us for whatever nefarious reasons, is only, we have to look back at some of these stories of some of these abductees and how they describe their experience.
All right. Great call, Kathleen. Thank you for that. Well, just give me a sense of where your mind is at with the alien abduction phenomenon, because we have sort of these two camps. One camp seems to view the alien or ETs as this our brothers out in space, and they're here to study us, but also perhaps guide us and help raise our consciousness into the fifth dimension and welcome us into the Galactic Federation. And then in the other camp, they're these nefarious entities that are poking us and prodding us, and as Kathleen indicated, perhaps engaged in some kind of alien-human hybrid program. Is it one, the other, a combination of both? Where are you at with all of this, Roderick?
Well, I think that where I'm at with it is I'm in the middle because, number one, I've learned over the years when I talked to Captain Robert Salas, who was one of the Minutemen at the Mastrom Air Force Base when he turned off our nuclear weapons. And one of the things he taught me was, hey, we just got to trust the witnesses. And so, therefore, you're going to get witnesses that are going to tell you, like Whitley Strieber in his book, they probed him, basically did some nefarious things to him. When it gets down to that other camp, CE5 camp, where, it's they come in peace and we summon them up and, I take those two stories totally different, Richard, because they're just seeing lights in the sky. But these other people are being abducted and poked on, and they feel a little different about the outcome than just saying, hey, look at that. There it is. So, but I think it'll all change if one of them landed and abducted all those people who were sitting there with summing them up. So I just have a little more humor with it and think about it. But in the middle is where I stand. And so both sides have a legitimate argument of what they think.
All right, let's say hi to Howard, west of the Rockies, Vancouver, Washington. Welcome to Coast, Howard. Good morning.
Hello, Richard and Roderick. I've been following the UFO subject for quite a few years, and I've come to think that the greatest fear our government has is not so much of the aliens, but the idea of having their technology fall into the hands of our adversaries. Now, with that in mind, this past week, there have been several reports about a UFO being shot down over southern Russia, and I was wondering if MUFON had any additional information about that.
Yeah, it's a great story. I mentioned it on Coast last night.
I haven't gotten any. I've gotten personal texts from people that sent, look at this clip. You hear about this all the time, and it even sparred into, the UFOs or the ETs are keeping them from using their nuclear weapons with this thing that's happening in the other country. And so it just sparks into so many things. But the story that they shot down something probably, could have happened, and we won't know because it's going to be kept a big secret until we get some footage from people or some boots on the ground that actually saw something. So, but as far as MUFON concerned, it is probably surfacing, or moving about our organization. For me personally, I get a lot of, personal texts and emails from my, followers that, it talks about that story. But I have not done any total investigation in it.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it was a drone or something. But as you say, there hasn't been a lot of information coming out since the initial report, which was, about 5 days ago? I think last Tuesday it came out. So we shall see. Howard, thank you for the call. Appreciate that. Let's see. Let's say hi to Charles is in Sebastopol, California. Charles, welcome to Coast. You're on the line with Roderick Martin.
Hi there, and hi, Robert. Great subject. So I've been following UFO things for many, many years, but here's the one I wanted to ask about. In this recent congressional hearing, where they were supposed to be looking at examples from, say, the TikTok flybys and some other examples, what they showed was an extremely brief, like a couple of seconds, of one of the TikToks flying by. And and they didn't even bother to tell about multiple radar stations tracking the same objects, multiple pilots seeing the same objects over a length of time, the fact that these things had gone from 50,000 feet down to ocean level, in fact, into the ocean, back out again. There was a lot of evidence they bothered not even to talk about at all, which was really discomforting. So my thought was, I wonder how many of the Congress people who were there realized that maybe there was more to it, or they just shrugged their shoulders and said, oh, there's nothing there after all, and kind of walked away. I was wondering what depth of perception or penetration into the congressional thoughts that hearing might have had.
Great question, Charles.
Is that for you? Is that for you,
No,
Richard, or you want me to take it?
You take that one, Roderick.
Well, great question, great observation. I think in the end of the day, they're all on the same team. Okay, all of the Congress. They have to be. They took an oath to protect and serve the people of the United States in the best interest. So although they had to give us something, you have to look at the undercurrent of conversations when it comes down to what they display. For example, when we first saw the Tic Tac videos, when they played the recording, what did we hear? You hear excitement. Yo, yay, look at that thing, right? But when 60 Minutes interviewed them, they was a little nervous. They was fear. There was a lot of things. So that's something you don't want out in the public, that our military are fearing something we can't defend ourselves from. So those narratives changed. So when they decided to do this congressional hearing, they knew all they had to do was scratch the surface. But if you looked at the camera angles that they were showing, there was a lot of empty seats there that people wasn't really taking it serious because they probably knew they was just going to show us some little bleeps of things. And then you had people saying, oh, I didn't know. Oh, that's all I knew. Oh, I never heard of that. So that, wag the dog theory or system that they have is there. And so we, the people, yourself, people like us that still have these conversations, and we just got to hope that more and more younger people that begins to get into politics go in and replace, and this is what's happening anyway, and begin to replace some of these people that's been there for 20, 30 years, keeping a big secret a keeper. And that's how we got to approach it.
All right. Roderick, we'll take another time out, bottom of the hour, back with more calls, more of our conversation. Here's Kevin Morby taking us into the break. Beautiful Strangers, singer-songwriter born in Lubbock, Texas. Hey, it's a bit of a Texas theme show tonight. Back with more right here on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back. Say hello on Twitter at Richard Serrett. The website strangeplanet.ca. All right. A newly discovered comet could be visible to the naked eye as it shoots past Earth and the sun in the coming weeks for the first time in 50,000 years. According to astronomers, the comet is called C 2022 E3 ZTF. I keep telling you, they have to come up with more romantic names for these celestial bodies. C 2022 E3 ZTF. After the Zwicky Transient Facility, which first spotted it passing Jupiter in March of last year, after traveling from the icy reaches of our solar system, it will come closest to the sun on Jan 12th and pass nearest to Earth on February the 1st. It'll be easy to spot with a good pair of binoculars and likely even with the naked eye, provided the sky is not too illuminated by city lights or the moon. You can read more about the comet in the news section up at coasttocoastam.com. Say, if you like what you hear from me tonight, this morning, and you want to know more, you can visit my recently revamped, redesigned website, strangeplanet.ca, strangeplanet.ca, and there you can stream and subscribe to my podcast, Richard Serrett's Strange Planet. New episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Richard Serrett's Strange Planet. And if you want to get deeper into Strange Planet, you might want to think about a premium subscription. There are 3 subscriber tiers to choose from. You get access to my back catalog, commercial-free listening, a free subscription to my monthly newsletter, discounts on merchandise, and even an exclusive monthly Q&A with me over Zoom. strangeplanet.ca. It's a one-stop shop. strangeplanet.ca. All right, back to more of your calls for Roderick Martin, the host of Why the Big Secret, right here on Coast to Coast AM. And we're back with Roderick Martin, certified MUFON field investigator and the host of Why the Big Secret on YouTube and the podcast as well. Back to the phones we go, and let's see. Paul is in Buffalo, New York. Paul, welcome to Coast. Good morning.
Good morning, Richard. Good morning, Roderick. And my call is, I guess it's the basic skeptic call. We're now 75 years from the alleged incident at Roswell, and yet we're still not an intergalactic society. None of these miracle technologies have manifested, and we're supposed to believe that for 75 years, the United States government, the former Soviet government, now Russian government, have almost, I guess you would say, omnipotently kept this secret from the world. Meanwhile, we can't even withdraw from Afghanistan, and they can't prosecute a war against Ukraine without looking like idiots. I find the whole idea of a vast conspiracy by our inept governments laughable, frankly.
All right. Excellent points. Paul, Roderick, what say you?
Well, I think that, you know, that 75-year time frame is definitely by design of keeping things a secret from us and keeping it all mystical, and so that we really don't know what's really happening. And at the same time, yeah, we still have things that are happening in society in real time with all these other countries, with things are changing. But you better believe that this particular secret disclosure is a global work of all these people working together. It's not just the United States that wants to keep it a secret. It's Russia, it's China, it's all these countries, because it all boils down to the technology. And whoever gets it is not going to tell the other country. But we know we have a lot of it because we can see the remnants in some of the aircraft that we design and some of the weaponry that we use. And so it's just the beginning. 75 years is just the beginning. It's going to continue to play out on a global side of things, and then it's going to then come down to, you know, our countries individually and how we all approach the subject.
But Paul, I think Paul's point, not to put words in your mouth, Paul, is that if they had the technology, if the United States had the technology, surely they would have used it by now. But, you know, if you see the ineptness, as he says, with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and our adversaries clearly are not using it. If nobody's using it, then does anybody have it?
Yeah, I mean, we are using it. The technology exists in our everyday life. From whether it's microchips or whether it's things that are happening, you know, in real time with everyday technology. Now, as far as in military concern, yeah, we don't have to display future alien tech when our current tech from the aliens is already working today. You know, it's no stance that what's happening over there in the other countries and how they're able to withstand themselves from Russia, you know, is based on some of our technology that we've used or helped or aided, so to speak. And a lot of our technology, which is probably using old technology, is probably from reverse engineering over the years. And so we have the tech. It's there. We use it. It's our secret. It's what's keeping us in power. It's what keeps us safe from other countries that don't have that information. And that's what is happening.
All right, Paul, great call. Wild card line, Carl is in Boston. Carl, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Hi, Richard. Anyway,
Hi there,
I guess I'd say I had a comment, but earlier lady or woman had answered it. But, you know, I guess I tend to agree. I don't think that I'm on the side of the fence that I don't think they're nefarious. I think they're here to help us. You know, the ancient Egyptians, you know, I see things all over. And, you know, I guess my question is when do you think they're going to touch down? Because it's all over social media that, you know, they're coming down soon and, you know, stuff like that. So what is your best hypothesis, or have they already done that? You know, I heard there was, you know, touchdown on the White House lawn back in the 40s or 50s. And, you know, I was just wondering what you thought of that, sir.
All right. He's looking for a mass UFO invasion, a time frame, I guess.
Well, there was a time, I don't know if you remember, Richard, there was the Israeli prime minister, I think, or wherever he was over there, UFO program. He predict that it's coming because the extraterrestrials think it's time to reveal themselves. But if you think about what we say about these ETs, that they are higher intelligence, they have all of this higher technologies. And one thing's for sure, they already know the implications of our social, you know, statute if they were to show up today, and how religion and all of these things would take place. And so, therefore, I don't think if they are in peace, they're not going to come and rattle the ship like that. And so, therefore, that's one perspective that I have. But on the other side of the fence, if the stories are true, that they're working with the people that's in power, then once again, the system is going to go as far as it can go. But we also, as I conclude here quickly, is that just like the human race, we have different race of people, and all over the world, then there's different species of extraterrestrials, and they all could have a different perspective on what's happening with Earth and what they want to do with the humans or explore or all of these different things. And so we just don't really know who's behind it all. It's like, Dorothy. We need to pull back that curtain.
All right. Yeah. You mentioned the Israeli. I think that was the retired space chief, and this was a couple years ago. He made this remark about ET already being here, and as you say, working with governments and so forth. And then, we haven't heard from him in a while. It was Hamish Head, I think his name was. He just kind of, I don't know, vanished off the face of the earth. Unless I've missed something, I haven't heard anything from him recently. But I mean, that was a pretty momentous statement, I think, right up there with Canada's former defense minister Paul Hellyer talking about UFOs. And then you had this former Israeli space chief saying something pretty sensational, and then crickets. It always seems to happen that way. All right,
well,
let's say. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
And this is where this Whistleblower Act needs to come from, and that's the reminiscences. Why people don't talk, because the ones that do, they disappear.
All right, let's say hi to. We're going to go to Randy in Chatsworth, California. Randy, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Hey, thank you. Great show tonight. I wanted to share some information I gleaned from Stu Webb at stewebb.com. He's a very high-level whistleblower from the CIA, and he had befriended the son of Learjets, and the son told him that the government contracted his dad to build some 150 anti-gravity aircraft. So I've always thought, since I heard that many of these UFO spottings, it's coincidental that they have the red and blue lights just like our aircraft do. Do you think that extraterrestrials glean that information from us, or are these really government aircraft? I believe they're government aircraft, and I believe that they have a purpose. And I'd like your thoughts on that.
Well, I agree with you, Randy. I think we discussed earlier with another caller about this, the idea that probably the vast majority of UAPs are advanced U.S. military aircraft. Roderick, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think that yes, when you think about the traditional lights that we see, or the color schemes that they're using. But then again, like I said before, we're talking about, intelligent life forms. We're talking about that they're trying to blend in within our society when they're flying over, and they could easily use colors and things that are familiar and work with the narrative of, they're not seeing us, they're seeing their own stuff. But I'm with the caller. A lot of these things are going to be government aircraft. And at the same time, our government understands that whatever we see in the sky, and I tell everybody, whatever is in the sky that's unidentified is a UFO, no matter what it is. If we don't know what it is, it's an unidentified flying object. So definitely when we see craft of unknown origin or new technology that we have not seen in the past, then, we're going to call it a UFO.
All right. I think we can squeeze in. Ben is in Augusta, Maine. Ben, welcome to Coast.
Oh. Hello?
Go ahead, Ben. Hi, Ben. You're on the air with Roderick Martin. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I wonder, how we're listening to a scenario it could be that maybe, if we ever develop time travel and, maybe this is us coming back and, this is why we're, there's coming at us in a distant way that, that is actually us from the future versus, another UFO, species from another planet. I'll take my answer up in line.
No, it's a great question. I mean, that's the time traveler hypothesis. It's been discussed on Coast many times. I've discussed it on my podcast. Have you ever gotten into that that subject matter, Roderick? The pilots of these crafts are basically our they're us. They're us from the future.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. I did a show, a YouTube video or live stream about time travels this past week, and we talked about that. And I think that, it's possible that it could be us coming back from the future. But if it is, then it'll be a lot easier for them to show ourselves, because why? We will look like them. I don't think that at the end of the day that we are experiencing that, because I heard a story. Someone said, well, there was a time travel picture that I saw that a person was coming back to view some event in the past. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But at the end of the day, if they are time travelers from our future and it is us, then it will be a lot easier for them to present themselves because we won't be startled by what we see versus anything else.
All right, I'm going to try and squeeze Glenn in here from La Junta, Colorado. First-time caller, Glenn, welcome aboard. You're on the line with Roderick Martin. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I read a while back, I'm not sure just when or where, but that these ETs were communicating with our government, and it was at their request that this stuff was to be kept secret. They wanted to communicate with our government only. And that's the way they wanted to work with this planet. All governments. They figured it was a lot safer, probably for them as well as us, to not have communication with the public. They were better off communicating, relating with our government, because there's a lot less individuals in the government than there is the general public.
Right. Cut out the middleman. Glenn, great call. Thank you for calling, and welcome aboard. You're now officially registered as a Coast to Coast AM caller. Roderick, how do we subscribe to the YouTube channel, the podcast? Why the Big Secret?
Well, basically, go to the YouTube channel. Just do a search, Roderick Martin, then Why the Big Secret. The channel should come up. You can definitely subscribe to YouTube. The podcast, of course, is anywhere where you listen to your podcast. The website, whythebigsecret.com, is a great way to make contact. If there's a contact form, if you have stories or things that you want to share, especially in the African-American community. We're really, truly searching and really trying to put together a past timeline of some of these events. And so whether whether you're not Black, that's fine. We all work together as one. Is for the collective of ufology. You may have, African-American friends that may have some stories. Just send them my way. I'm really painting a picture and really trying to do that. So that's where they can find me. YouTube. Tell them to go to YouTube and go to the website, whythebigsecret.com.
Roderick, what a great pleasure. Thank you so much for hanging out for 2 hours. I enjoyed it. I hope you did.
Oh, my God. Yeah, it was great. Anytime. And just, again, I really appreciate you having me here, Richard.
Roderick Martin. All right. Hour 2. Lost Secrets of Ancient America. Stay tuned. More to come on coming to you live from my home studio in Old Thornhill, just north of Toronto. Say hello on Twitter at Richard Serrett. The website again, strangeplanet.ca. All right, coming up on Coast to Coast AM. Advanced civilizations in pre-Columbian America, giants, stargates, and more, with researcher, filmmaker Josh Reeves. That's next on Coast to Coast AM. Josh Reeves is a Dallas, Texas-based researcher, filmmaker, radio talk show host who first learned of government crimes in the 1990s by reading Jim Marr's Crossfire. which led him to start investigating black operations and secret societies. He gives his commentary and original point of view on news and current events, as well as information about chemtrails, secret ancient societies, bloodlines, hidden technology, Freemasons, and the overall plan of the global elite. He's host of the Global Reality Channel on YouTube, and he's just released Volume 3 of Lost Secrets of Ancient America documentary series. Josh, welcome back to Coast. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. It's great to be with you, Richard.
I mentioned Crossfire, but you and I have talked before. If memory serves, was it Crossfire, or was it Alien Agenda, or was it Rule by Secrecy by Jim Marrs, or was it all three of them?
Well, that's a great question. Well, you got it right before. Actually, what got me into this stuff was originally Crossfire, but how I got into the Lost Secrets of Ancient America, what led me to researching the rock wall, and ultimately led to this entire trilogy of film series, was the book Rule by Secrecy, where he mentioned in there, maybe one day we'll have answers to all the questions that we seek. Maybe we'll have answers to the things like the mysterious rock wall in Rockwall, Texas. And I grew up around the area of Rockwall, Texas, and experienced strange things around that area my whole life. So that's what ultimately led me to investigating the rock wall and ultimately all of these ancient secrets of America. So here we are.
Right, because Jim also lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Before we get into the mysterious rock wall in Rockwall, Texas, did I hear this correctly? You started actually kind of researching unexplained mysteries all the way back in the third grade?
Absolutely, it's absolutely correct. I saw a documentary on HBO when I was in third grade on UFOs, and at the school I went to, they actually had a few books on UFOs and the Bermuda Triangle, and that's what led me to it, and it ultimately just stayed with me my entire life and grew into what it is now.
All right, so the rock wall, which I think is primarily the subject matter that you tackle in Volume 1 of Lost Secrets of Ancient America, and it might even be the first sort of documentary treatment of the rock wall. So let's get into it. The rock wall that was unearthed in Dallas County. Just kind of give us all of the important data regarding the rock wall. What is it? Where is it? What does it look like, and so forth?
Well, it's a fascinating subject. It's buried under the town of Rockwall that takes its name from this structure. When the settlers first moved to the area and began to try and dig water wells to get groundwater, they kept hitting some sort of rock, and now there's no natural occurring rock in that area, so they were perplexed. And once the excavations began and they began to see what they were dealing with, they began to find these masonry walls that actually were stones with buttered stones that were exactly how masons would build walls. And everyone in the town was arguing over whether or not they were going to be able to name the town after themselves. And a local Freemason who had just moved to town from Tennessee came and looked at the walls and noticed the work, noticed that it had buttressing and all of these techniques that a stonemason would use. And he told them immediately, well, none of you get to name the town after yourselves. We have to call this town Rockwall because someone was here long, long before modern humans were. So the main thing of it is that people always ask me, how can I see it? Well, you can't, unfortunately. It's buried under the town of Rockwall, Texas. But that's really my main goal with all this, to eventually have my own dig and be able to document all the things that people have seen in other digs that they have had. But the main thing about it is that it has all of these structural engineering materials built into it that are specifically designed for structural engineering. And that's how we know it's beyond shadow of a doubt not a natural formation, because you have something like the element called niobium. And niobium is used in reinforcing pipelines, jet engines, rocket engines. And the only way you can get niobium is by extracting it from an element called columbite. Well, that process was unknown to humans until the late 1800s. So how there's niobium in these stones and absolutely no columbite is a mystery. The other thing about it is you have these elements like titanite, brookite, starlite. You have tourmaline, which is resistant to high and low frequencies that will be applied to it, and I'll tell you why that's important in just a second. But all of these materials that are made. Normally, when you would take these materials and mix them together, their molecular structures would just bond together. But somehow, in a process unknown to man, the individual component materials in the rock wall stones remain independent in situ in the stones. This is a process we can't even replicate with modern technology. We have no idea how this is done. And when a dig was conducted there in 1999, it was found that when a excavator was accidentally placed on top of the wall, that the low-frequency vibrations from the engine of the excavator caused the wall to shake and vibrate and produce electrical energy. So one of the functions of this wall seemed to be not only a structure and a seawall as well, because shark's teeth were found embedded in the wall. It also served as some sort of energy generator. It's 20 miles in diameter. It's about 80 feet down to the bedrock. It sits on limestone bedrock. And the amount of sheer weird happenings that I experienced around this area as a young person growing up, I experienced a missing time event around the area. I experienced all kinds of strange sightings, UFO sightings around the area. So when I read Jim Marr's Rule by Secrecy book and heard this mention of this rock wall, immediately, this was in 2004, and immediately the light bulbs went off, and I went, that's it. I just knew instinctively, that's it. That's what I've been looking for. That's why there's been all these crazy happenings, and I've experienced such weird things around this area, because there's something there, and it's in the, something in the neighborhood of, I don't know, something like 400,000 years old, judged by the dating. So it's just an amazing, anomalous thing, and the cover-up of it has been ongoing and continues to this day, Richard.
So it has, what do they call that? Piezoelectric qualities?
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
And what do you surmise the purpose of this wall was? Was it a fortress? Was it well, you mentioned a seawall. It was to prevent whatever was inside the walls from being flooded. What do you think the wall was for exactly?
Well, at the time in which it was constructed, we know that the inland sea, came all the way up to the location that is now Rockwall, here just outside of North Texas, right outside of Dallas, where I am. And so initially, I think it was meant to both serve as a seawall. I think it was all those things. I think it was a structure. And again, as I said, this ability for it to basically produce infinite free energy is amazing. And it uses sound to do it. And that's why you would want an element like tourmaline inside of the stone. Someone put that material. None of these materials are found anywhere near here, this area of North Texas at all. So you would want tourmaline in there, because tourmaline can resist high-frequency sound waves without shattering. It's one of the only crystals that can do that. So whoever built this thing absolutely had a knowledge of engineering. The stones get bigger the deeper that it goes down. It's built with a buttressing effect that it's intended to it can hold live loads. So one of my estimations, too, and I know this, as wild as it sounds, one of my theories about the rock wall has been that it could have been some sort of an ancient extraterrestrial launching pad, because it's built to withstand hundreds of thousands of tons of pressure on top of it. It's built to produce energy. So it may have been something where they were actually launching crafts or ships off of this thing hundreds of thousands of years ago. It's so fascinating, Richard.
And are portions of the wall exposed above ground, or is it all below ground?
No, it's all below ground. The only thing that you can really see are stones that have been excavated and put on display. The rest of it is all underground. And the hard part of trying to do a dig out there is trying to find a piece of property or someone that has a piece of property where we can actually conduct and do a dig at. And with property values continuing to rise and everything being built up out there, eventually, in the not-too-distant future, it's going to be impossible to conduct a dig there. So I'm hoping that in the future we'll be able to actually get some LiDAR scans going and see if we can get an underground picture, much like what they've done in the Amazon jungle finding ancient structures. I'm hoping that at some point we can have some LiDAR data and actually get to see a 3D underground topographical image of this thing.
Tell me about your missing time episode in the vicinity of the rock wall.
It was very interesting. I was about 16 years old. a friend of mine and I were going to work in Dallas, and right when we crossed this specific point where I now know part of the rock wall sits underneath, we stopped to get gas, and we had left home about 12 o'clock. When we were at the gas station, we'd only been gone about 20 or 30 minutes, and we noticed that it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And we called home, and we were like, what time did we leave home? And they were like, are you crazy? You left at 12. And we're sitting here going, wait a minute, how did that happen? How did we experience 5 hours missing time? And then another time, I was out by near the lake, near the area where part of the rock wall is submerged under what is now Lake Ray Hubbard, and we experienced some sort of I don't know what you would call it. It was almost like I don't want to call it like a demon or something. We experienced some sort of a dark energy that you could physically feel in your body in this area. So, and I've known people who have seen all sorts of strange cryptozoological creatures near that lake as well. There's all kinds of reports on the internet of it. So there's high strangeness and high weirdness all around this area, Richard. And it never really made sense to me. But once I started to find out about the rock wall and how they had found, these giant skeletons there back in the 1800s and had been reported in the local news media and everything, and then summarily they disappeared very shortly after that. That's when I began to say, okay, we're dealing with something here that's far more advanced than just something that primitive humans could have built.
So let's talk about the nature then of the cover-up, which began, I guess, around 1927. Enter the Smithsonian.
Well, the thing about it is that time and again, and of course, there's the Smithsonian denies all this, but where these reports initially came from, they initially came from people who were finding giant skeletons and then reporting them to the Smithsonian, and then once the Smithsonian would show up and examine them, they would never hear anything back. The skeletons would disappear, and there would never ever be anything else about it again. And I had my own experience. Some of this stuff you wonder if it's true, if it's just hearsay and this, but I actually had my own experience with this when I was making Volume 1 of this series. There was a coin that was found in a strata of soil in an old water well up in Illinois that had a woman holding, almost like the Statue of Liberty, a woman holding a flaming torch, and it had writing on it that matched identically with a 2.5-ton garnet stone that had been found in Rockwall, and then it was stolen out of the old Rockwall courthouse by someone named Congressman Ralph Hall, who's now since passed away. But he was witnessed by multiple inmates they used to keep the inmates in the top part of the old courthouse in Rockwall, where now they have parts of the stones there where you can go and see. And on this 2.5-ton garnet stone, there were these petroglyphs found that had never been identified as any other writing in any other civilization ever. And then this coin was found in this water well in Illinois with these exact engravings on it. And the Smithsonian, when I contacted them, the Smithsonian said they indeed did have this coin. They were willing to let me examine it, take pictures of it and everything else. And then when the day came for me to go and do that, it mysteriously came up missing, Richard, on the day that I was set to go and examine this thing. And so that's when I started to say, okay, you know what, maybe there is something to these stories about the Smithsonian dumping bargefuls of artifacts into the ocean and disappearing these giant skeletons, because if they're willing to do that on something just like this and this coin with what I experienced, and there's no telling what else is going
on. Who is or was Count Byron Kuhn de Prorock?
Count Byron de Prorock? That was a gentleman who, oh gosh, you're really flexing my memory here, because this is 10 years ago since I visited that information. But Count Byron de Prorock, I can't even remember, Richard, to be honest.
Well, there was something about, he was like an amateur archaeologist. I think he was Hungarian-American or something, but there was something to do with, he looked at the rock wall, and he had traveled the world.
Absolutely. Well, he had actually gone and visited the ancient structures at Carthage, and according to him, what he saw in Carthage matched the same building style and structures of what he saw in the rock wall. And that led him to believe that whoever these people were in the ancient past that had built the structures at Carthage had also built the ones at the rock wall.
Wow. And a quick geography lesson for people maybe who have forgotten: Carthage was led by Hannibal in a war against ancient Rome. Riding the elephants through the Alps down into to invade the Roman Empire. But this wall would certainly predate ancient Rome, right? 400,000 years old, perhaps.
Absolutely. And that's the thing about de Prorock. He was actually one of the first people to lead the excavations at Carthage. So he definitely had a knowledge of this. But that's when I started to think about the fact that it's possible that whoever these people were that were getting instructions to build these structures, they were getting them from a much older source, and possibly from a source that had been here for a long time.
Unbelievable. Now, this rock wall would it be considered a suburb of Dallas? It's about 25 miles away from Dallas. Is it considered a suburb?
Yes, absolutely. It's a suburb of Dallas. It used to be more rural than it is now. It's grown up a lot, and it's a lot closer of a suburb than it used to be. It used to kind of just be a sleepy bedroom community, but it's definitely grown now. And a lot of these locations and a lot of these areas that would be prime places for a dig have been built on top of now. So time is of the essence, and I'm really hoping to at some point be able to do a dig there, but it's just going to be all dependent on whether or not we can find a spot to do it.
We're approaching the break at the bottom of the hour here, but if you have so many people living virtually on top of this mysterious rock wall with all of these piezoelectrical qualities and strange time distortions and so forth, I mean, that must just be like international world headquarters for high strangeness. Like, are other people reporting missing time who live there?
That I don't know. I know that a lot of people, there's a lot of old timers, and there's a lot of people that have go back to the old days of Rockwall who still kind of are in charge and run things there, and they really don't like people talking about it. They really don't like people doing excavations and stuff like that. They really just want to keep the thing kind of covered up and not talked about. But I've talked to people who live there, and they tell me all kinds of strange stories of things they've experienced, things they've seen too. And again, once you add all those events up, it just can't be a coincidence when you have so many people experiencing such high strangeness and weirdness around the area. In fact, I was told of a cave near the rock wall that when you try to go near it...
Sorry, Josh, I'm going to jump in here because I've got to get into the break here. My apologies. We'll pick this up on the other side. Three Dog Night taking us into the break. Easy to be hard. Right here on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back. For years, archaeologists have worked to understand the hidden meanings in the thousands of examples of prehistoric art found on cave walls across Europe. These artistic works often featured animals such as bison, fish, reindeer, and the now extinct aurochs, but some of them also included a sequence of dots and marks that seemed to be some form of writing system, one which experts had long struggled to fully interpret. Now, a new collaboration between researcher Ben Bacon and experts from the Durham University and University College London has finally lifted the lid on exactly what these symbols meant. It turns out the marks were actually part of an ancient writing system, a lunar calendar, which was used to document the timing of the reproductive cycles of the animals. And you can find out more about this enigmatic writing system in Ice Age cave art in the News section up at coasttocoastam.com. And coming up tonight on Coast to Coast AM, that's Monday night into Tuesday morning, federal civil rights attorney Daniel Sheehan, who graduated from Harvard Law School, where he co-founded the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review, and later returned to undertake graduate studies at Harvard Divinity School. He'll update George Norrie on his work on examining the compelling evidence that the U.S. military and Defense Department has recovered more than one crashed UFO, which they've been deconstructing the technology to back engineer it. In the second half, a doctor of clinical psychology as well as an intuitive medium and divine channel, Lori Ann Perlman, has been helping people overcome negativity and dark entities for over 30 years. She'll discuss with George the history of exorcism and how to tackle demons, dark energies, saboteurs, and how to avoid future assaults. George Norrie in the air chair tonight on Coast to Coast AM. Back to more of my conversation with filmmaker, radio host, researcher Josh Reeves right here on Coast to Coast AM. And we're back with researcher, filmmaker, talk show host Josh Reeves, based in Dallas, Texas. And we're talking about Lost Secrets of Ancient America, Volume 3, just out now, and we will get to that in just a moment. I just wanted to finish up with the rock wall in Texas, and I was asking you about some other incidents of high strangeness associated with the rock wall, and you began to tell us about this cave.
Yes, absolutely. There was a report that I'd received from some people who had a cave on their property not far from the rock wall, and they told me that if you try to take cameras or cell phones or anything, or any kind of batteries near this thing, they immediately drain, and it basically zaps any electronics that go near it. So again, there's no way to tell whether this has something directly to do with the rock wall, but I tend to think that it being in such close proximity to it, that there absolutely has to be something to that. But again, there's always been a lot of weirdness and high strangeness around this area. And it also lies directly on the 33rd degree parallel, which is also where Roswell sits on top of as well. So there's all kinds of weirdness and strangeness surrounding this thing. And the fact that it's aligned to the equinoxes and the solstices, just as a lot of the other ancient sites like the Serpent Mound in Ohio are, we start to see that there's something very, very technologically advanced about this thing. And again, high weirdness abounds at all levels.
So let's talk about Volume 3. A bit of a gap. I think Volume 1 came out in 2013, Volume 2, 2014, and then like an 8-year gap before Volume 3 came out. What happened?
Well, we just didn't have the funding to finish these. I don't have backing from, I'm not rich. I don't have backing of big multinational corporations or studios or TV shows or anything like that. This is completely self-funded and funded by the support of my audience. So we just ran out of funding to finish Volume 3, and finally I was able to get it done and get it released a few months ago. And that's why it's vitally important to, Coast to Coast AM has made it real easy for people to find how to buy my series. All you have to do is just go to coasttocoastam.com and go to the search tab and type Josh Reeves in, and it brings you up to a profile page of me, and there's a link there. And Coast to Coast AM listeners can get a discount now and get the entire trilogy for only $35 in one download collection. So that will really help us be able to do more work and hopefully get a rock wall dig going at some point, which is really the ultimate goal because, as I said, when the dig was conducted in 1999, they found all these anomalous things like the bulldozer shaking and the thing producing energy, but none of this stuff was documented. So it's my goal to have another one of these digs and then have all this stuff that we've heard about, the shark's teeth embedded into it, the piezoelectrical energy production. I want to document all this, have it all on film, and then show it to people because that wasn't done the last time there was a dig. So I think if we get some actual documented evidence of these things occurring, get it on film and get it out there to people, we could have a real chance of getting some interest in this thing beyond just what has been out there up to this point, Richard.
Oh, Volume 3, a pretty huge undertaking. Did you, am I correct in saying that you visited or toured 12 different states for Volume 3?
Not for Volume 3, but in Volume 1. In Volume 3, we went to Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, Arizona. So that was really just the Four Corners region, and that had come from what I had established in Volume 2. And just looking at all of these different civilizations and all of these different artifacts and areas that seem to have building styles and building techniques that were well beyond what the natives would have had any kind of access of knowledge to do. So that's really what the whole Rockwall thing started for with me with this whole series of Lost Secrets of Ancient America was if there's something to this, if this is what we think it is, then there must be other things across the United States like this, and that really sent me down the rabbit hole of trying to travel to all these different places, get footage, and see if I could find things that matched up and connected. And certainly I did.
Did you visit the Hoover Dam in Volume 3?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I did. The reason that I visited that was because I had heard these stories and heard this stuff of ancient star. One of the things that came up in the earlier works in Volume 1 and Volume 2 were the idea of these ancient stargates and the representations of these different sculptures and statues. We have one here in Dallas, Texas, called Thanksgiving Square, and it's this strange piece of artwork that depicts a stargate. There's many other ones like that across the United States. And so I had heard these stories about an ancient stargate being hidden inside the Hoover Dam. And when I had conducted my research into Colorado and Nikola Tesla in Colorado Springs, and this signal that had been decoded that had a star map to the Epsilon Bootis star system encoded in it, it really led me to looking into the idea that this might be possible. But when I got to the Hoover Dam and I saw all of these, the first thing I see are these two cherubim statues that are identical to the statues that are seen on the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant is said to be, it's talked about in ancient Sumerian texts as being this power supply, the power supply for the bond between heaven and earth, which is some sort of stargate. So immediately I started to see this iconography that I had seen in the past connected to stuff like the Ark of the Covenant and Masonic stuff, and it's all littered around the Hoover Dam. So it was a real fascinating exploration for me.
So let me see now. The dam was built in the 1930s, wasn't it? Was it completed in the 30s?
Yes.
So, I mean, how do they build this huge undertaking, this architectural engineering marvel right under our nose, and conceal the fact that it's some kind of a stargate?
Well, it seems that they found this thing buried out there or something. As far as I know, information is really sketchy. But as far as I've been able to put together, and I talk about this in Lost Cities from Ancient America, Volume 2, because in the area of what is now known as Area 51, that area, Groom Lake, there was the whole base is built into a mountain that was supposedly this habitat of an ancient extraterrestrial race called the Havamasuvs, and it was found to be into this rock. So essentially the only way they could find to cover it up was to build a military base into it. And of course, they have the world's longest runway there. So there seems to be, especially in Nevada, because in Volume 2 I also traveled to Lovelock Cave where they had found these skeletons of these giants there as well. So all across Nevada there seems to be a lot of information pertaining to extraterrestrials being there in the far distant past, and as well as high technology being utilized. And much of what we see today, I believe, from Area 51 and all that stuff is just this old stuff that they found that they have slowly tried to turn into modern technology throughout the years.
What else did you uncover during Volume 3?
Well, as I said, trying to figure out how a lot of these ancient civilizations had gotten access to some of the knowledge that they had to build this stuff, just like I had found in Volume 2 when I went to the Ohio Valley and started to find stuff like the sexagesimal Babylonian numerical system and the structures there. I started to find things that seemed like we had modern humans constructing them, but operating from a playbook from someone with higher advanced technology. And that's the same thing, I believe, with the Rockwall as well. So in Volume 3, when I started researching all of the stuff that's found in Colorado Springs, I started researching, as I mentioned before, this mysterious signal that Nikola Tesla had decoded there. And I found this place right near where the Pikes Peak Mountain is, called America the Beautiful Park. And in America the Beautiful Park, here's another one of those stargates located again. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. It's got all these obelisks that I talked about in Volume 2, which relate, as we were mentioning earlier, with Carthage and whatnot, and these ancient builders and the Amorites and whatnot who were obelisk builders. This America the Beautiful Park has a stargate. It has these obelisks, and when you take a sky view image of this park and mirror it, flip it around, you can see that in Lost Secrets of Ancient America, Volume 3. You can see where I show that. You see what appears to be, it looks like a spacecraft. It looks like either a model or plans or something that were built into this site in Colorado that looks something like some sort of spacecraft. So I started to wonder if that signal, which was decoded to be a map of the Epsilon Bootis star system, home to this supposed race of extraterrestrials called the Arcturians. And that's when I started to say, okay, it's possible that these people, these ancient people, may have gotten a lot of this knowledge and a lot of this information to build these highly advanced structures from this race of extraterrestrials that come down and are said to be able to inhabit and take on different forms. And that's when I started to shift my focus away from the idea that we were just dealing with just giants, as I had thought before, because one of the things about the Arcturians, it said that they can appear to people as giants, they appear as angels, they appear as gray aliens even. So it started making me consider the fact that what we've been dealing with is this one group of extraterrestrials who have been taking on a different form throughout the centuries and coming down and attempting to aid humans.
During the making of Volume
3.
Right. And during the filming of Volume 3, Lost Secrets of Ancient America, did you speak with, interview any of the I guess the Pueblos, and do they have stories, ancient stories about star people that sort of fit into all of this?
Well, they're kind of cagey about it. They do, but they're real hesitant to talk to anybody about that kind of stuff, like me, because they just, and with good reason, they just don't seem to trust anybody. I had a lot of pushback from some of the Native Americans that I tried to talk to, stuff like Pyramid Lake in Nevada, which is this lake that has this, what supposedly it's a natural structure, but it seems to be some sort of pyramid structure that was built many years in the past. And I went to try to speak to the Paiute Indians there and get permission to film it, and they wanted $1,000 just to talk to me and just to be able to film the rock structure there. They wanted control over the content of my movie and whatnot. So it was really, really strange trying to have communication and have a dialogue with the Native people, because they're very guarded, and again, with good reason. They're very guarded about their ancient traditions in their past, but there seems to be a lot of belief that the people who seeded their tribes and the people who gave them knowledge and set up the tribal structures of the natives came from the stars, in their opinion.
Came from the stars, right. And the idea that these ancient civilizations, advanced civilizations, existed, hundreds of thousands of years ago, is that perceived perhaps as a threat, I suppose, to the narrative that the indigenous people have always been in North America?
I don't know if it's necessarily a threat to it. I think that it's very guarded because there's been so much controversy. I mean, originally the original scientifically held belief in academia was that aside from Native Americans, there was a separate culture called the Mound Builders. There was a separate group of builders that were responsible for these earthworks. And then after the Trail of Tears and after a lot of the ancient sites started to be taken away from indigenous populations, then the narrative and the story changed, and that got done away with, and then all of these ancient structures all got associated strictly with Native Americans, when even a lot of the Native Americans have said, this stuff's older than us, this was here before us, things of that nature. And the same has been said with a lot of the Native American tribes with the giants. One of the things they found in Ohio was what they described as a giant graveyard. And when a local Native American was interviewed in a local Ohio newspaper, he told the newspaper that these people were here long before the red man. So I think you can have both. I mean, I think both can be simultaneously true without negating one or the other.
All right, Josh, we're going to roll into the top of the hour here. We're going to open up the phone lines and take questions and comments. Josh Reeves, researcher, filmmaker, talk radio host. All right, back with more of our conversation and your calls right here on Coast to Coast AM. Reincarnation and aliens and UFOs are the most commonly held paranormal beliefs among Brits. Research has found more than 2 in 5 Brits, 43%, claim they believe in the spiritual side of life, with 14% even having dabbled with a Ouija board in an effort to contact souls from beyond the grave. Those in London consider themselves to be the most spiritual in the country, believing most in witches. Meanwhile, residents of the Humber are most open-minded to mind reading and psychic powers, whilst Northern Ireland residents are the most likely to expect a Bigfoot sighting. The poll of 2,000 adults was also revealed an even split when it comes to those who believe in an afterlife and those that don't. But 33% are more skeptical, with those in the West Midlands the most dubious about supernatural phenomena. You can read more about the top 10 most popular paranormal beliefs, including ghosts, aliens, and witches in Great Britain. That story's in the news section up at coasttocoastam.com. Back to more of my conversation with Josh Reeves, filmmaker, the man behind volumes 1, 2, and 3 of Lost Secrets of Ancient America, plus your phone calls right after this on Coast to Coast AM. Josh Reeves is with us, the host of Global Reality Channel on YouTube and a filmmaker. Volume 3 of Lost Secrets of Ancient America has just newly been produced and is available. Volumes 1, 2, and 3. And again, how do we get those? How do we screen those and purchase those, Josh?
Well, Coast to Coast AM has made it very easy for people to do that. All they have to do is go to coasttocoastam.com. They can go to the search tab at the top and type my name, Josh Reeves. It'll bring up the guest page, and it has a biography there. And if you scroll down, it says videos. And where it says videos, it says the Lost Secrets of Ancient America trilogy. And if they click that, it'll take them right to the download store where they can purchase the download of the film. And if they buy the trilogy in the next 24 hours, they're going to get it at a discount, especially for Coast to Coast AM listeners.
Fantastic. All right. We were talking about the mound builders before the break. I went to Moundsville. I think it's called Moundsville in West Virginia, right across from the West Virginia State Penitentiary. There is this Moundville Museum. There's a huge mound, and they really sort of, in the museum, if you go in there, they really bend over backwards to try and convince you that the mounds were not built by giants. That I believe they say that the ODNI people were responsible for these mounds, at least in this part of the Ohio Valley. First of all, who were the ODNIs? Do we know much about them?
Well, supposedly they were this group of builders that were said to be giants. So, they say that was the ODNIs, but they also try and, as you said, try and get you looking in another direction. I actually have never been to Moundville in West Virginia. I went to Moundville in Alabama because there's a Moundville there too, and shot for Lost Secrets of Ancient America Volume 1. And I also went to Mound City, which is in Chillicothe, Ohio. And just as you stated, the penitentiary there in Virginia, in Chillicothe, Ohio, parts of the Mound City complex are actually built into a penitentiary there, and they're off limits and inaccessible to the public. So it's very interesting that so many of these sites where, they're supposedly trying to tell us that, okay, this is, there's nothing unusual going on here, but you find these anomalous things. And as I mentioned, in places like, the Newark Earthworks in Ohio, you find, and in the Serpent Mound as well, you find this Base 60 numerical system, which is a Babylonian numerical system, and you find stuff in, like, the numbers within the Serpent Mound. You find stuff like 666, which people think is Satan and the devil, but in Babylonian numerical system, 666 is a number for the sun, and that's why a lot of these ancient sites, like the Serpent Mound and others across the Ohio Valley and even the Rock Wall, are all aligned to the equinoxes and the solstices. So we definitely see in the building and the structures of these ancient sites that their connection to the stars is built right into the structures themselves.
Do you believe that there are still giant skeletons to be found in any of these mounds, or have they all been removed?
Well, it's certainly possible. I mean, there's a lot of sites that are still on public property which have not been excavated and have not been touched. I have actually heard from a couple of people who said, "I have a mound on my property. Come and excavate it. Come and see what we can find." And every time that I try to contact those people again, they mysteriously, I can't hear back from them. So there's definitely an ongoing cover-up with all of this stuff. I want to make it clear that I'm not coming from any sort of agenda in this. I'm not trying to. I don't come from a religious agenda. I'm not trying to prove the existence of the Bible and prove all these things. I have absolutely zero agenda when it comes to this stuff, and I'm not left or right politically. I simply want the truth, and that's what I'm after, and that seems to be what they continue to cover up. I mean, the Rockwall thing really opened my eyes more than anything else to just how far the cover-ups are willing to go when it comes to this stuff, because it seems to challenge the established narratives of both science and religion, and that seems to be what they're most afraid of, is these things being, usurped and turned over and basically being out of their control.
Well, that was my next question, is why the secrecy? Why the cover-up? I mean, can you imagine the lineups at the Smithsonian, the various Smithsonian museums, if they had giant skeletons on display? Why? I mean, is this about, I don't know, protecting tenure for university professors? Why don't they want to rewrite the history?
Well, here's the thing. The Smithsonian Institute, people think of the Smithsonian is a government, United States government-controlled organization, and it really isn't. It actually gets its funding from a lot of overseas people, and they have offices all over the world. So if anything is found, they get called, people get called out to go and collect it immediately. Now, from what I've been told, from what I've found in my research, a lot of people believe that the Smithsonian is directly connected to the Vatican, because the Vatican has these, what we talked about before previously, Richard, was you had asked me if I thought that there was actually a big warehouse like in Indiana Jones where the Smithsonian stored all of this stuff, but certainly the Vatican is said to have those type of things. So it seems that the cover-up is really about keeping these established narratives of both science and religion in place in order to keep their narratives of control in place. And those tend to reflect who we are, where we really come from, what our destiny here is on Earth. And I think that's something that every human has the right to know, and they don't deserve to have it covered up for them. So that's why my question, all this stuff, and trying to uncover it is so important to me, Richard, because it's not just about finding the lost secrets of ancient America. It's about connecting the narrative and connecting the real truths of who we are as humans and how we got here and where we came from. So, like I said, I'm not funded by a television show or any. I'm completely self-funded and funded by people who support my work. And when people buy the downloads, that's what they allow me to do, is to be able to continue this work, because I'm not done yet. I still have a lot to do, and I want to uncover this Rockwall. And like I said, really document this stuff and bring it to the people so they can see it, so we're not just hearing these stories that we're being told of stuff that happened there. I want to show it to people and bring it to people, because I think that us finding out and being in control of our destiny as humans is the most important thing we can undertake in this life, because the powers that be don't have any interest in telling us the truth, and that's going to come down to the individual. It's going to come down to people like me and you and the work you do and everything else. So it's really vital and important to me to continue this work into the future as long as I can.
Maybe I'm being naive, Josh, or I'm missing something here, but it would seem to me that it would be in the interest of the church to uncover these giant skeletons or to put them on display, because that would support the biblical narrative, would it not? The giants that roamed the earth during Genesis and after the flood.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the more perplexing things about it. I mean, there was a guy who conducted the last dig that was done in Rockwall in 1999, and he had his dig shut down by what he called church people in black, essentially Vatican people, who showed up and told them to shut the dig down. And then people within the city of Rockwall, people like Congressman Ralph Hall, got involved and had it shut down. So you're exactly right. I mean, you would think. I mean, the thinking would be that if you could find this and prove this, it would justify their existence. But they don't have an interest in doing that, and it seems to be that what they're afraid of is that the stories of evolution and the stories and everything else that we've been told, and I think it absolutely has something to do with the whole extraterrestrial thing, because, as you said, you would think that it would make sense that they would want these giants to be out there to justify their own existence, but the cover-up continues.
All right, let's grab a call here east of the Rockies. Bernadette is in Harvey, Illinois. Good morning, Bernadette. You're on the line with Josh Reeves. Go ahead.
Good morning. I'm so happy to get through. I have a question about the Georgia Guidestones that I just realized or just learned was dismantled in 2022. Might there have been a connection to this wall that he's been discussing?
The Georgia Guidestones, yeah, they were unceremoniously blown up by some unknown perpetrator recently. What do you know about the Georgia Guidestones, Josh?
Well, I don't think that there's any connection to that to the rock wall, because those were man-made and those were constructed by someone. I found a lot of very interesting things that connect to the Georgia Guidestones, and some people believe that they were constructed by Scientology. I mean, there's a lot of strange stuff out there, but essentially, I think what they were some sort of guidelines that were set up by a secret society. And there's a lot of nefarious stuff, but as far as like who destroyed it and everything, there was supposedly a time capsule underneath the thing, and I think whoever blew it up, that's what they were looking for. But it's a very strange thing. I never really spent a lot of time focusing on the Guidestones, other than the fact that area, the reason why they placed it there is because that area supposedly, prior to the destruction of Atlantis, was one of the areas where Atlantis was located. And, of course, the city of Atlanta in Georgia takes its name from Atlantis. So there seems to be that they were marking that spot for whatever reason as a sacred spot, and a spot where possibly the future civilization, after some sort of great cataclysm wiped out the current one, would be rebuilt at. And this is something that Sir Francis Bacon talked about. He wrote a book called The New Atlantis, and in his book he talked about how the old Atlantis was located in the area which was then known as the New World, which is America, and that the new Atlantis would be built upon the ashes of the old, and that just as the old Atlantis, the new Atlantis would face the same situations where we would have to make a decision between power for the sake of power or power for the sake of the good of the people. So it's very fascinating that Sir Francis Bacon had talked about these skyscrapers, flying machines, all this stuff hundreds of years ago in his book that all came true. So it's one of those things to me that's fascinating about the Guidestones, is that it seems that whoever was responsible for it definitely had an advanced knowledge of things that none of us are really aware of at this point.
I know you mentioned, covering the four corners in Volume 3 of Lost Secrets of Ancient America. Did you spend any time at the Denver airport?
No, because we this was all done by traveling by car. But I've studied that extensively and whatnot. It's a very interesting thing. I think that the Denver airport definitely connects to some of the stuff that I found in Lost Secrets of Ancient America Volume 3 in Colorado Springs, because I mentioned earlier these Arcturians and how they take on these different forms. And what you have right outside Colorado Springs is you have the what's called the 50th Space Wing, which is where the Space Force runs out of. And one of the things that is consistent upon all of this stuff is the idea, and we talked about these underground bases, underground military bases. So I definitely think it's possible that all throughout Colorado, including with the Denver airport, that there is some sort of, I don't have any evidence of this, but I believe that there is some sort of underground facilities there that connect to both the airport and the military bases in Colorado Springs, where, as I mentioned earlier, Nikola Tesla had decoded this signal that had come down, and also where there happens to be some very strange iconography and ancient sites as well.
All right, we'll go back to the phones. The wild card line. Tom is in Placerville, California. Tom, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Thank you, Richard. Hi, Josh. Nice to talk to you. I must say, you do have a sense of humor after listening to a lot of your stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. I've been out to Pyramid Lake, and I've seen a lot of crazy stuff out there, and the Giants Cave, out in Lovelock. But I had a couple questions about the Anunnaki. Do you think? Let me see. Do you think that since they're unable to go back to their planet, that they're actually still here? And do you think that Zachariah Sitchin was actually told that Enlil, or maybe Anu, was Satan, and that if they are still here, since Enlil, tried to take us out more than once, then that's what's going on, because he's angry that he can't leave this place, so he's going to take us all with him.
Well, it's an interesting statement. I can't claim to have the answers to that, but if you read the actual scholarly translations of the Sumerian text, there's nowhere in there does it talk about them leaving. So a lot of people believe that they never left, that they're still here, that they exist underground, and maybe possibly some of these underground bases like I was talking about as well. So that's one of the many things. I don't know. I actually found there's a book called The Murder of Meriwether Lewis. And a lot of Meriwether Lewis from the Lewis and Clark expedition, when these guys were coming across America, they were finding mounds and evidence of giants all over the place. I mean, they found in Alabama, they came across a giant Native American man sitting lotus-style on a mound, and his name was Tuscaloosa, and that's where the city of Tuscaloosa in Alabama takes its name from. And one of the things that in some of these lost writings of Meriwether Lewis, he talks about this ancient race of giants being shackled and held underground, and that one day someone was going to unleash a plague of giants upon the earth, which had the possibility of destroying humanity. So, I don't know. I don't have all the answers, and I don't know that there's anything to that. But just based on my research and what I've looked at, it's definitely fascinating. As you mentioned, it doesn't say anywhere that if they were here, that they ever left. But I also think that's possibly where the whole Stargate thing comes in, and these different portals that are located within the Earth that allow you to jump great distances across the galaxy.
Josh, I got to jump in here. We're heading into the bottom of the hour. We're going to take a quick time out and get to more phone calls, questions, and comments for filmmaker, researcher Josh Reeves, Lost Secrets of Ancient America. Nickelback taking us into the break with Those Days right here on Coast to Coast AM. All right, welcome back. Say hello on Twitter, at Richard Serrett, and don't forget the website, strangeplanet.ca. An acting class in Peebles, Scotland, is reportedly seeking students who would like to help memorialize 27 people from the town who were tried and executed for witchcraft back in the 1600s. Although the victims are already commemorated by a granite monument in Peebles, as well as in a chapter devoted to them in Borders Witch Hunt, a history of witchcraft trials in that part of Scotland, the acting group's director sees the dramatization of their ordeal as a way to honor them in a unique way. And as the witch hunts of the day targeted men, women, and children, the opportunity to play a role in the theatrical scenes is open to people of all ages. You can read more about this in the highlight carousel up at coasttocoastam.com. All right, back to more of your questions and comments for Josh Reeves as we continue to delve into the lost secrets of ancient America right here on Coast to Coast AM. And we're back with Josh Reeves, host of the Global Reality Channel on YouTube. How do we find you, Josh?
Well, as I said, if people go to coasttocoastam.com and they go to the guest section, or they can go to the search engine and type in my name, Josh Reeves, Reeves. Coast to Coast AM has made it easy, and all the relevant links to find not only how to listen to my show and all my work, and as well as the download store to buy all of my downloads of my films and audiobooks. It's all right there at coasttocoastam.com for you.
All right, let's go back to the phones, and our good friend Cornelius joining us from Alexandria, Louisiana. Cornelius, welcome once again to Coast.
Hey, well, Richard, Happy New Year to both you and Josh and all the listeners and callers, and thank you to Donna Walker for getting me through. Look, Josh, my name is Cornelius White here in Alexandria, Louisiana. I was just telling Donna Walker. Oh, first I want to address you, Richard. I want to thank you for having that first guest on. A lot of African Americans are into supernatural stuff and UFOs, so I'm thanking you for that. And for that Swamp Fox. I never heard of him from Oak Grove, Louisiana. Now, Josh,
Tony, yes.
My question for you. We have a place called Poverty Point, Louisiana. L.A. Marzulli's been over here and stuff, and we've got mounds like that where these giants were at. I think they were fallen angels. I believe in the Bible and stuff. And the Bible shows where all of this stuff came from, and I think they were here first before man was here and stuff. So that's my premise. So God bless you, Richard and Josh. Really enjoying the show. Come to Poverty Point, Louisiana.
Oh, Cornelius, thank you so much for the call.
I need to. Yeah, I need to. That's actually the one place that I have not been able to go to yet. So maybe I'll see you over there sometime. I do have that on my list for sure. What's fascinating about Poverty Point is that, and I discussed this in Lost Secrets of Ancient America, Volume 1, is that in the state of Michigan, there was found all of this ancient copper mining that was going on thousands of years ago. Somebody was excavating copper out of mines in Michigan and then transporting it through the United States all the way down to the location of Poverty Point, and then sending it somewhere over to the Middle East, because the copper that is found in Michigan has been found in artifacts that have been found in what is now Afghanistan and Iraq and that kind of thing. So absolutely. I mean, I think that the giant thing is, as I talk about in Volume 1, I talk about the giants in regards to what are referred to as the Amorites, the biblical Amorites. But, you know, there was a precedent that these people actually did exist, and they were said to be giants. You had Og, who was one of these giants. But Poverty Point is fascinating because it's not just mounds. It's the only site that's ever been found that has both mounds and earthworks. And there is a difference. Mounds are structures that can be used for both burial, and they're not always burial mounds. But then you have earthworks, which are something completely different, like what you see up in Ohio in the Newark earthworks and whatnot. And at Poverty Point, Louisiana, you have all of the type of earthworks and mounds in one site, which you don't find anywhere else. So it's a fascinating spot, and I hope to be able to go there in the future for sure.
All right. You mentioned the copper mines on the I guess the south shore of Lake Superior, where these have been discovered. I mean, without those copper mines, there wouldn't have been a Bronze Age. I mean, you need copper to make bronze. So we're talking about what, 5,000? Well, the Bronze Age was roughly 3,000 BC to about 1,200 BC. So we're talking 5,000 years ago.
Yep, absolutely. You're 100% correct, Richard. That is a correct assessment. There would not have been that age without that copper. And it's fascinating because, you know, whenever you test, the thing about copper is you can test it and determine the location that it came from because it's all different and you're able to see. So in these artifacts, they were found scattered throughout the United States. Some of these artifacts made of this copper were actually found in mounds. So someone was giving some of these artifacts and giving them to some of the people along the way before they were being distributed and sent out from the Gulf there and sent somewhere over to the Middle East. So, yeah, it's just fascinating that of all the places where copper is found, this location in, as you mentioned, on the shore of Lake Superior there, I mean, there was so much pulled out of there. It's completely unprecedented, and there's no other sort of comparable location like that that's ever been found anywhere where that kind of copper mining has been going on at that scale that far back.
Wouldn't they have had massive ships to send it all over to Europe?
that's the real question, the how and all of that stuff. How did they get it over there? The weight of it, all the rest of it. Again, it also had to be some sort of technology, just like what I've talked about is found in the rock wall, that we just don't have any idea how it works. I mean, there's so many things. Again, like I talked about with the rock wall, just the ability to be able to use these minerals in a way where their molecular structures of the independent minerals stay independent in situ in the stones and they don't combine. We just don't know how to do that. And one geologist that I talked to, a oil and gas geologist, told me that it was his opinion that when the rock wall was constructed, the gravity on Earth was completely different as it is now.
Wow. All right. Let's go back to the phones, and let's go west of the Rockies. Matt is in Bellingham, Washington. Matt, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Yeah, hi. So I have a question about Columbia. So what is Columbia when you hear like Washington, D.C. District of Columbia and Columbia University, Columbia Pictures? Is there some like global society that comes from Columbia that means something with all these?
Columbia is an ancient deity. I think it's a representation of. There's lots of different opinions on. Some people think it's a representation of Isis. Some people think it's a representation of Inanna. I mean, there's a lot of different theories and stuff on it, but it does seem to go back to an ancient goddess worship and definitely some of these gods and demigods that were supposedly on Earth in ancient times.
All right. Thank you for the call, Matt. Do you think the ancient Egyptians, maybe the Phoenicians, were also in North America? I don't know, 5,000-10,000 years ago.
Well, I'm not sure exactly if it was exactly those people or people who either seeded those people and gave them knowledge or had come in contact with them. I mean, certainly there's stuff that's been found in Texas and Oklahoma. I mean, in Oklahoma there was something that's been described as a Phoenician fortress that was found there. There's been all kinds of speculation that the Phoenicians had contact. In fact, the Cherokees believe that they were in contact. Their ancient people were in contact with Phoenicians because they were the only tribe that had a written language. So, there's all kinds of stuff that it does appear that people who were from, and I found this a lot, especially in Lost Secrets of Ancient America, Volume 1, there definitely is a lot of artifacts, a lot of things like the Heavener runestone in Oklahoma that does appear to make references to things that come straight out of the ancient Sumerian text. So without question, I think there was people from the ancient Middle East here. Who exactly they were and where they got their knowledge from is really the big question.
Any thoughts on America's Stonehenge that's in New Hampshire, I believe, right?
Yeah, that's in New Hampshire. Yeah, that's a very interesting. I don't know. I never really got a lot into it, but it does appear to be one of those things where, to me, it's all of these. We talk about all these different ancient civilizations and whatnot, and there's so much separation that is put upon these things. And I talk about that in Lost Secrets of Ancient America, Volume 3, the idea of diffusionism versus isolationism, and the idea that these civilizations that were just across the river, of the Mississippi River, from each other, is scientifically held belief that even they couldn't have had contact with each other. But when you start to research things, you start to find out that, wait a minute, all of these things that we're told are separate, or separate cultures, or separate entities, or separate civilizations, were all the result of this one mass civilization that had advanced knowledge and advanced technology. They're just known by different names at different times when they existed.
All right, let's go to the phones again. East of the Rockies, Greg is in Buffalo, New York. Greg, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Yeah, hi, Richard. Hi, Josh.
Hi there.
Hi. Yeah, my mother's grandfather was a constable in Moundsville, West Virginia, in the 1930s.
Oh, wow. Small world.
Yeah, the small world. And I can't remember his name, the British guy. It's kind of a related area. The book's called Origins of the Gods. And,
Graham Hancock.
Graham handbook, yeah, that's more of a worldly, I guess, global thing but it seems like it's a related subject matter because I'm getting interested in this. So,
well, you definitely want to check out Josh's series.
I'll do that. Yeah, I'll check the website out and all that. But
well, I definitely have tried to show that in these films, Lost Secrets of Ancient America, that it's not, because I think that kind of turns people off sometimes. That they think that I'm only dealing with stuff that has to do with America. But really, if you watch these films, you'll begin to understand. You'll see how I'm connecting it to things throughout the world. I don't think there's any separation in any of this stuff. I mean, many of the ancient sites, the earthworks in the Ohio Valley, are aligned directly to the pyramids of Giza. So, as Richard had just asked me here before, if I thought it was possible that Egyptians were in America, I don't know if they were necessarily Egyptians, but somebody who had the same knowledge base and was coming from the same pool of information as they were definitely here, and they were definitely aware of the Great Pyramids thousands of years ago when they were building these structures in the Ohio Valley.
Oh, sure. I know it's connecting the dots and all that. Yeah, I understand. And
all right, Greg, thank you for the call. All right, let's go west of the Rockies. Jim is in northwest Utah. Jim, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Hi, guys. I'd like to know what you got on artifacts removed out of a cave in Grand Canyon and hidden by Smithsonian around 1909, that whole story.
Absolutely. Yeah, I cover that, actually, in Lost Secrets of Ancient America, Volume 3. I mean, in all of my work into this, the two things I get asked the most about are, of course, the rock wall, and the second is exactly what you just mentioned, the ancient civilization, the ancient stuff that they found at the Grand Canyon. I mean, it's not, it's not even questioned that the Smithsonian sent people there to examine it. What they found and what happened to those artifacts is where the questions start to come in. But I've seen enough and talked to enough people, and I traveled there and to determine that there is definitely something to it, because there's parts of the location where this stuff was supposedly found, which are government property. I mean, you can get shot. You can't trespass on the areas, and the areas where it supposedly was even found, even if you're just going, hey, curious, hey, let's just go over here and see if there's anything to this. You can't even go on those areas because those areas are so protected. So I just think if there's nothing to it, why the secrecy? Why are those areas off limits? And, yeah, for sure, I covered that in Lost Secrets of Ancient America, Volume 3.
All right, Jim, thank you for that. What are you working on next? Is there going to be a Volume 4?
Well, I tell you what, I'm really trying to, like I said, have my own dig into the rock wall. There may be a Volume 4. It just depends if, hey, listen, if all the Coast to Coast AM listeners go out and buy the trilogy right now, it's over 7 hours long, then there definitely will be. But I'm really struggling to just survive and do this work and everything else, because it's really difficult to get people to fund this kind of work unless you're going to get funding from someone who wants to control the outcome of your data. So I do all the elements of this film. I mean, I do the writing, I do the researching, I do the voiceovers, I even compose and perform all the music in my film. So I'm definitely a one-man show, and it's only because of the support of people like the listeners of Coast to Coast AM who want the truth, who want someone like me to be able to go out there and try to find this stuff and bring it to you. And that's what I've dedicated my life to do, Richard.
It seems, Josh, that the odds are stacked against people like you in terms of, trying to get at the truth, particularly when it comes to, trying to excavate in rock wall. I mean, do you think they'll ever allow you to put a shovel in the ground and get a good look at that wall?
Well, it's not a problem. And you got to remember, Richard, this is the state of Texas. You can do anything you want on property you own, and nobody can say anything about it. So that's really the main thing. We've got to find somebody that either owns property or who's willing to buy a piece of property, where through the mapping that we have, we can determine there's a piece at, and then we can get excavators in there and we can do whatever. It's not a problem of doing the actual dig. It's a problem of finding a piece of land where we can have permission to do it. And really, in a situation like that, you want it to be property that you own. So that's really been the struggle that I've had. And, hey, you never know. There might be someone listening to this show that may live in Rockwall, may know where an area is where we can excavate at. Please get in contact with me if you do. I'm never going to give up on this because I believe it's important, and I believe we can shed a lot of light on this stuff if we can document these things like the piezoelectrical energy production of the wall, how it responds to low-frequency sound waves, the shark's teeth embedded into it, the sand dollars that were found that weren't petrified. You know, all of these things I want to document and put them on the record for future generations so we can continue to look for these things, not just in places like Rockwall, but all over.
I'm sure there are other rock walls out there as well, not just in Texas, right?
There are. In fact, there's another one in Texas, and I talk about that in Lost Secrets of Ancient America, Volume 1. There's another one that's found down near Austin. It was found in ancient times, and they found all of these, like, Babylonian-type statues and stuff. There's very little information I can find about this, and I've tried to go find out where this thing is located at, and it's almost impossible to find but it was reported in the newspapers in, like, the 1920s and 30s, but there's very little on it. But I'm sure there probably are. I heard about one in Tennessee. There's been some sort of ancient wall that was found in Tennessee. I haven't found very many reports on that, but again, I think you're right, Richard. I think there's probably more of this stuff out there, and I think if eventually we can, get LiDAR scans and whatnot, we'll be able to do like what they've done in South America with some of these Aztec and Mayan civilizations where they're finding completely new things underground that you just can't see any other way.
Well, keep on the trail, Josh. You're doing great work, and it was great hanging out with you for the last 2 hours. Thank you so much.
And Richard, you're the best. Thank you.
Josh Reeves, Global Reality Channel on YouTube, and The Lost Secrets of Ancient America, Volumes 1 through 3. For George Norrie, George Knapp, Lisa Lyons, Stephanie Smith, Tom Danheiser, Dan Galanti, Chris Burrows, Michael Cozio, Donna Walker, Ryan Stacy, Tim Banal, and in Brantford, Ontario, Scott Park. I'm Richard Serra. Thank you for your ears and your voices, your beautiful voices. Until next time, so long for now.